Hello, this is Christian Okoye, former Kansas City Chiefs. You are listening to Grilling Truth.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Survive and Advance on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Survive and Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. I am your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my two co-hosts. First up, we've got former 19, I guess he's still, because I said that before and he got all mad, but he is still the 1981 national champion with the Indiana Hoosiers, number 34, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. I have a question here now. Don't we have one co-host and one guest?
Oh, John's going to be on every Sunday. There's no reason.
Okay, well, that makes him kind of a weekly guest, not a co-host.
I'm kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, he's not laboring through all the discussions like what we went through last show,
Here we go.
and having to tolerate all that and get into this. So he's a guest commentator on our show.
Okay. I guess Steve wants you
All
to
right.
know your place, John. So we've got.
As long as I get to talk, it all comes out the same. So.
He's bar none the smartest man on the show. So.
I don't think there's a competition for the smartest man on this show. Of course, we've got our resident grueling truth lawyer from West Virginia, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Hey, John.
Good to be here, Mike. Good to be here, Steve. I'm doing double duty today. I was in New Jersey this morning. I'm in West Virginia this evening. So,
all right.
Well, those are two great. You know what? West Virginia and New Jersey are two great places to be from.
Two great states.
It's kind of like Terre Haute, Indiana. Terre Haute, Indiana is a great place to be from, meaning you're not there anymore. You're from there.
Why are you going to rip on Terre Haute, Indiana? It's not like Bloomington's a lot better.
No, I'm from Bloomington, too. I live in La La Land.
All right, guys. So tonight, our topics, we're going to talk about the NBA a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about NASCAR and what sport we think is going to be the best 25 years from now or the most popular. We're also going to have a discussion about the NFL and the recent Eric Reed, Colin Kaepernick situations. So we'll touch on all three of those topics tonight. I want to remind you that you can follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. And you can follow Steve Risley at SRisley34 if you have any questions. And John, I think yours is what? At Real John Law?
RealJohnnyLaw.com. Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start off with the NBA.
Real Johnny Law. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to. So you don't have to plug yourself for the next 10 minutes, John. We heard it the first
No
time.
kids, really, John.
Jeez.
What is this?
It's a desperate
You try to do
for Twitter followers.
for advertising here?
I tried to do it as quickly as possible.
All right. So if you say it one more time, then you have to pay us to be an advertiser for the show or a sponsor.
That's why you hear silence.
I know. That's why I figured I'd pause and see what would happen. All right. So we're going to talk about the NBA. And to tell you the truth, guys, the NBA to me kind of died in 1990, 91 when the league started to go, you know. I didn't like the style of play. Everything was a pick and roll. That was about it back then. And I have followed the Pacers since then, so I have watched some games here or there. But this weekend, I wrote a preview article previewing every playoff series. And the thing that struck me was this wasn't like the last 5 or 6 years where you kind of knew the two teams that were going to be the best going into it because you had two stacked teams and everybody else. These playoffs are really competitive, and we really don't know who's going to end up in the finals. And then as I started watching these games, you know, I watched the 76ers. I watched, of course, the Pacers hammer LeBron, which was a great thing. And the thing that struck to me was how hard these guys play now. And how this looks, to me, Steve, a lot more like college basketball nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're seeing an influx of the younger college formatted coaches come into play. A lot of the old Hubie Browns and the old style school coaches, or the Pat Rileys, are falling out of the game now. The Phil Jacksons, which are great in their day and age, but you're seeing these young coaches come in here who have a different mindset, and many of them are calling, Brad Stevens is a prime example, probably arguably one of the best coaches in college in professional basketball right now, but totally have a college mindset and builds teams that way. I think in the 90s we were looking at a situation where we had teams of great players, and now we have great teams and made up of good players and great players certainly, but the word team comes before player all of a sudden, and you're seeing that. I think that the proliferation that started with Golden State. Golden State may have been the first one to actually come out, and obviously the precursor probably would have been San Antonio. The Popovich started that process, and Golden State perfects it. And now you're seeing more and more of these teams built around this concept of, hey, let's put a great team together, not a team of great players. And I firmly believe, as a model from college basketball that we see, and it's carrying over maybe now into the NBA, which I think is going to really benefit the NBA and revitalize it, is we have a situation where a great team will generally almost always be a team of great players. And I think that's where we're getting into. I've watched more NBA basketball this weekend than I probably have, like you, in the last 10 years. And I tell you, the Pacers are no fluke. Philadelphia is going to be a team to beat. Boston, once they get healthy, is going to be a team to beat. Houston's up and coming. And you're just seeing a changeover now of coaches who build great basketball teams. And I think that's going to be wonderful for the NBA in terms of being able to revamp their marketing and bring a really classy quality product to television that we all want to get behind and watch and cheer our teams on.
Yeah, and my big thing was I loved the NBA in the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s. And in the 80s, John, you had great teams with great players, which is where I think maybe we're headed again. Now, you know, we get into the 90s, the Bulls were a great team, but they really didn't play against any great teams. But when I remember the Celtics, Lakers, even the Sixers, the Bucks, the Phoenix Suns in the early 80s, there was a lot of great teams back then. And even though you knew the Lakers and Celtics were probably going to be in the finals almost every year, you still got really good basketball. And when I watch this, I see really good basketball. Everything's just not a pick and roll or a guy going one-on-one. They're actually moving the ball around.
Yeah, well, I agree, Mike, and I don't want to be blasphemous here, but I think that even when you go back to those eras, I think it's a bit better in the areas you've talked about and the defense. I think you got better ball movement in the NBA than you used to. You have better defense than you used to. You don't have as much of the ISO game. You know, even in the 70s, and 80s, you had a lot of guys just going ISO, and you couldn't play zone. And even though they don't use it that much, still you can do more defensively than you used to be able to. And I think their quality of play has actually improved some. I think that it's not going to change because of money, but I think myself the only thing really keeping NBA from blowing up even bigger, even though it's big worldwide and of course has increased in popularity in the United States. It's one of the sports that's obviously increased steadily over the last 40 years, is that so many games and the playoffs being so long, they're not going to shorten that because of money. But if somehow they did and took somehow even a longer view, I think the sport could become even more popular. I mean,
can I interject here?
Yeah, sure.
John, to what you're saying, that's tying into what you're saying, because it's so true what you're saying. Is it? And here's what I think is happening is, and if you talk about the 80s, John, which you and I both grew up loving, we knew the names of all the players on the Celtics and the Lakers, didn't we?
Right.
I mean, we knew it was Walton, McHale, Dennis Johnson, Chief. We knew it was Larry, and we knew it was Coop and Byron Scott and Kareem and Magic and Rambis. We knew those guys because they were great teams. They all were making great contributions. Now, what I think is beginning to happen all of a sudden is, and again, I take this back to that kind of that three-letter word that's kind of gotten a negative connotation, but truly probably is a strong foundation of that. I say it's AAU. Because what's happening is the AAU, by the way they conduct and play basketball now at a higher level of competition, they're producing more talent. The dispersity of talent is growing. We're finding more players that we may not know the names of right off the hand like we would a LeBron or a Magic or a Larry, but they're producing more talent that's being dispersed to more teams, which is making more teams competitive and relevant. So as much as we kind of want to downgrade, what AAU might be doing to high school basketball, in general, overall, I think there's a more of an upside to AAU, because when I played basketball in my pre-high school era, there was no AAU. I mean, it was minuscule. It was virtually non-existent. To where now, basically, every player who plays at the college level or at the professional level now has come from an AAU program that's worthy. And it's interesting to say, I was listening to some of the broadcasts of the Pacers game today, and they were talking about LeBron having one of his best statistical years. And maybe, the Cleveland not being as strong as they were in the past, but yet this is the most assists that LeBron James has ever averaged in his 15 years in the NBA. So even a player of that stature is grasping the team concept and saying, to make myself more valuable to the team, it's not putting more points on the board and being an individual. It's about rising these buoys, rising tide rises all buoys. And then you see, a guy like LeBron shifting his focus a little bit, say, I need to be dishing the ball out more. I need to be getting other people involved. And then you take a look at a player like a Ben Simmons, who to me is a younger model of a LeBron or maybe even a Magic, maybe not quite as good outside shooter, those guys, but has all the thoughts of the game. But, Ben in his triple-double world is doing great. He dishes, he leads, he passes, he rebounds. These players are becoming more multidimensional rather than just singularly focused, where you had Kareem who scored, 35 points a game and really did nothing else in the game. He was not a presence anywhere in the post low, feeding the ball, and we saw the sky hook, and he got us 33 points a game. So I think the AAU is bringing that up. That's why you're seeing a big parity now in college basketball, and it's now beginning to filter in to the NBA with these coaches going into the NBA, and it's just big infusion of just a wider base of talent into the game. I think it's going to change the NBA a lot to where we're going to really enjoy watching the NBA play. These kids are going to play hard all the time, which is what the NBA needs.
Yeah, and I think that's
I think that's gotten better
before.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree. I think that's underrated about LeBron is that LeBron has always also made the guys around him better because he passes the basket with all the things he can do.
Well, has he made it better or has he made them winners? I mean, it was a big question. Has he made them better or has he made them winners? LeBron's always gotten the statistics.
And they've
come
won,
on,
Steve.
So,
Steve, the knock on LeBron.
No, I'm not criticizing.
The knock on LeBron has been
the
fact that he doesn't try to take games over.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he does it at the crucial time, and I'm certainly not knocking LeBron James. He is the best player in the game as it sits right now today. He is the marquee player in the NBA, and deservedly so for what he's accomplishing after 15 years. But to watch him shift and say, in his 15th season is his largest average of assists tells me he sees what as his role changing too, and that he has to continue to strive to get more players involved, especially when you look at this Cleveland team right now, who is very vulnerable. I mean, they are probably in a situation they need to rely on LeBron more than they've ever needed to rely on LeBron. And I don't know, without the help of the Secret Service people, they're going to be guarding LeBron in the game times, and that'd be the referees, if he's going to be able to be protected enough against a team like the Pacers, who plays great team basketball.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe the saddest thing I've ever seen in an NBA game was today when Lance Stevenson swung past his face, didn't touch him, and LeBron dropped like he got punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's the theatrical part of the NBA that needs to go away, and I think it diminishes the game. It takes away from it. It takes it a step closer to championship wrestling, which we know it's not championship wrestling. Or the WWE, but it starts to send a message that we're as theatrical and entertaining as we are competitive. And I think the NBA should be all about being competitive. And anything like that, to me, are why I enjoy watching college basketball more than I do the professional ranks. And it goes on in college leagues too, but they see the NBA players doing it, and it comes down. So I'd like to see that crack down on. It's almost like if you flop, it's a foul on you, a technical foul. And I don't know how you would ever measure that by any stretch of imagination, but there's no place for that in basketball. These guys are too good to have to act. Just play. Just go play.
All right. So when we look at the playoffs right now, let's talk about one that's near and dear to me and Steve's heart, since it includes the Pacers. So, John, do the Pacers beat the Cavaliers?
I didn't think so going into the series, but then you look at today's game, and of course, that's going to leave doubt in everybody's mind. But I'm trying to remind myself it's just game one, but it was in Cleveland, and LeBron is being forced to do an awful lot, and he's not getting any younger. As good as LeBron's been, there's got to be, even with him, there's got to be some degree of fatigue that's going to set in when you're being asked to do that much. So, you would think Cleveland can still rebound, but obviously it was not a good performance for them today.
Hey, Steve, you're getting to shut your dog up, by the way.
Those are not my dogs. I was waiting for that. Those are my dogs who are laying here quietly at my feet, listening to us broadcast. Those are not my dogs.
Well, I've probably got somebody breaking into my house to kill me right now. My dog's saving my life, and you're making fun of him. But what do you think, Pacers or Cavs?
I honestly think the Cavs will win, because I don't think the NBA is ready yet to withstand the fact of a marketing disaster of losing their prime player in the first round of the playoffs. I sadly believe the Pacers are a better team, a better organization, but I just don't think the NBA is ready to let go of LeBron James in the first round of the playoffs. Sadly, I still have that belief. I hope that belief goes away for me quickly. But at this point in time, when I look at the overall structure of the NBA and what they've stood for since 1980, when the Pistons and the Celtics and the Sixers and the Lakers were all in that group of just dominant basketball teams. I just don't know. I can't get myself in my head wrapped around the fact they're going to let LeBron James lose in the first round. If they can control it. Now, you can only protect so much. And I don't want to take away from LeBron's talent. I just think that he needs more help this year than he's ever going to need before. And it's almost to the point, the way the Pacers played today. And remember, the Pacers beat them regular season 3-1 in the regular series.
Yeah, but those were before all the trades,
this was no fluke win by the Pacers today. They pretty well owned Cleveland all year long. So the only question I would have again is, does the NBA want to let LeBron sit through their biggest rating sweep, their biggest advertising sweep, their biggest money-making sweeps? Do they want their marquee player on the sidelines? That's the only question I have about the NBA and LeBron James playing the Pacers right now.
That was my only question going into the series, because if you read the article on thegruelingtruth.net, I picked the Pacers in 6, and a bunch of people called me stupid and said it would be a 4-game sweep. I may be stupid, but it won't be a 4-game sweep. All right, let's go ahead and we'll transition, and we're going to talk a little NFL right now. And this is something that I didn't think we'd have to talk about.
Are we not going to talk about the rest of the teams in the playoffs?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Sixers?
I was only worried about the Pacers. I forgot what I was doing here. My dog's
Sixers,
barking screwed it up.
This Ben Simmons character and this team is a model of what the NBA should be gearing toward, or what the Sixers are putting together right now. They are a team concept group led by a player who is one of the most unselfish young players in the game right now. And these guys have no fear. I watched them play, and they absolutely have no fear playing, and they play free-spirited. We've seen a rejuvenated J.J. Redick come in and with some leadership and some incredible shooting. And I tell you, if I'm going to pick a team to come out of the East right now, I'm going to go with Philadelphia. I don't know if they can do it or not, because they're young. They're going to make young mistakes. But, Boston is every bit as talented as they are, but they're decimated with injury right now. And maybe next year is their year. But out of the East, you've got to like Philadelphia right now. And Toronto, I don't think Toronto, my whole message there is they haven't been there and done that before.
They've been there, and they've come up short before. That's their problem.
They've come up short, yeah. I still think that, teams with tradition and history, that stuff counts in every facet of the game. And occasionally you'll get an upstart come in there and do something, but to carry it through the 3 series to get to the NBA championship. I don't think Toronto has that kind of moxie. I just don't. I think it's Philadelphia's to wrestle away from Cleveland if the Pacers don't do it first. And I think that's what's coming out of the East.
Yeah, I agree with Steve on this, John. I think it's the Sixers, too. Do you have a different take?
I think despite today, I'll probably still stick with LeBron and Cleveland because, Boston losing
Your
Irving.
time's up. Your time's up, John, if you're going to pick against the Pacers there. You got to at least have the Pacers beat LeBron.
I'll leave it at that. But even though today didn't look good, I'll try not to let one day affect me.
All right.
Yeah, no, I don't think that the NBA can force LeBron to the championship, the NBA championships. But I also think they can force him to play at least into the second series, the second round. I think they can control that much of it. But beyond that, I think the competition in the national notoriety games on national network TV, ESPN or ABC, becomes so strong that it gets very hard to cover up at that point. So I think if LeBron falls to Philadelphia, I don't think LeBron can get by both in the Pacers and Philadelphia.
No, I think it's going to be too much for him. He's not getting any younger.
Yeah, I think so too.
He's
carrying too much load.
Real quick, before we get to the West, there is a poll on Twitter right now that is actually, I think we have 59 votes in the first 10 minutes, and that is what our main topic is tonight. So you can go to @GruelingTruth and vote on it, and that is what will be the most popular sports league in the United States in the year 2043. We've got the NFL, NBA, MLS, MLB. You can go @GruelingTruth on Twitter right now to vote, and we will talk about it when we, move on to that subject here in a few minutes. So let's go to the West, Steve, before I forget about the West. I'll let John go first because you went first on the East.
Yeah, John,
you reminded me.
On the West.
So I like the Sixers. You like the Sixers. John likes the Cavaliers. Who do you like in the West, John?
Somewhat on sentiment, I like Houston because I like how Mike D'Antoni's done different things, and now he's got Chris Paul and Harden, and of course they had a great regular season, but we know that's not always going to decide it when you get to playoff time, and especially you got the Warriors out there. But I like how because there is logic to it, and it makes sense in the way the game's changed. I like how D'Antoni and his brother Dan's done it at Marshall, done a good job with they're bringing the analytics to basketball, popular, and what they do with their analytics in basketball I think makes sense. So I'm thinking that it's funny, even though he's an older coach, it's the wave of the future in terms of coaching, and I'm thinking that there's a lot of logic to what they're doing. And, of course, you got to have the talent first before the analytics are going to matter. But I think with that combination, I pulling a little bit for Houston, but I think that they also have shown that they can do it this year.
Yeah, I would pull for Houston also. Before I get to Steve, I'm going to go second. We're going to make Steve go last. But my problem with the whole thing is this. Golden State's going to get Steph Curry back. And with Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, they're still loaded. Klay Thompson, they may be able to win the championship without Curry if it came to it, but Curry will be back, it looks like, pretty soon. So I think you get a Golden State-Philadelphia final. I hope it's Houston, but I think it's Golden State and Philly. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to tend to agree. A couple points here. One is I just think that there's no real cracks in Golden State's armor yet. Kerr is still an outstanding coach. He gets the young game. It's the most unselfish championship basketball team I've seen in the NBA in a long time. They have not shown me that they're willing to move away from that yet. We haven't seen Houston face a lot of adversity. They kind of glided through the West on top pretty much the entire way through. And while I think they're a great team, D'Antoni's a great coach, they're put together well. But I want to see what teams do in adverse situations before I anoint them any kind of favoritism like right. And I think that you're a champion until proven otherwise. And I would put my money on Golden State still. Champions find a way, and they are champions. and they will find a way to rise to the occasion. And I think they'll get. And Curry's not going to sit out. I mean, he's frothing at the bit right now, I'm sure, and probably they could bring him back now. But it's like, hey, as long as we can win without you, let's get through this round, and the more we can rest you, the better off it is for us. And I still have got to go with Golden State. And certainly, I go back to this. I'm still hung up on this marketing thing of the NBA in the sense that I don't think they want to lose LeBron and Curry in 1 year.
Yeah, but if the Pacers can continue to play the way they did today and win by 18, 19 points, there's not much the NBA can do about it.
No, you're exactly right. I do want to point out, though, to me, but it goes back to the mentality old school. The biggest disappointment in the NBA to me is Oklahoma City. They bought every superstar they could get, and they just bought a bunch of diseases. You talk about the throwback to what's wrong with the NBA. It's Oklahoma City. It's a team that doesn't play together. They put I before we. They have an overabundance of talent on that basketball team. But in the current configuration, and out here in LA, the talk continues to be bringing Paul George to the Lakers and watching the Lakers grow and develop as a young franchise, with the young talent they've got. I think it'd be a huge mistake to bring Paul George to the Lakers and what Magic's trying to do out here and rebuild this into a high-performing team. But Oklahoma is exactly where the NBA went wrong after Magic and Larry and those guys stepped aside. Went to the star system, and it's not working. It's not working there, and it won't work, and they'll be out. If they get past first round, we'll see. But certainly they're not going to be a contender for anything past that, in my eyes, at this point in time. They don't have the ability to work together to beat a Golden State or a Houston.
All right,
I like Golden State. I'm going to go with Golden State at this point.
Well, I hate agreeing with Steve, but Steve will enjoy it because, when we agreed on the NCAA champion, he got to be right, except for he screwed it up and bailed on his pick at the last minute.
Villanova was the best team in the college basketball this year, bar none, and they deserved it.
And you shouldn't have picked against them, Steve, but that's all right.
You're right. I shouldn't. I bet with my heart and not my brain.
Wait a second. Does John have to sing One Shining Moment too? Because he wasn't on that show that night.
No, I didn't make that promise. I was going with the number 3 seed Michigan the whole way, so I went with them in the championship game. But I thought it was a good call getting that far. But they obviously didn't have enough for.
They got outclassed. They got coach got class. It's over and done with. It's yesterday's news. Let's move on.
All right. Well, John's the one that carried it on. It was just supposed to be a little quick, funny thing.
Okay.
But I thought, what the hell?
Mike wanted
to bring up the fact that I was right again. Yeah.
He wanted to bring up
the NBA playoffs are off to the NBA playoffs are off to their best start in many years. There's a lot of good matchups, a lot of good games, a lot of good basketball being played. If you are not watching it and you haven't watched it because you have not liked the product, give it a chance. You're going to enjoy the product. You're going to really enjoy watching these kids play. These kids are college mentality players now, for the most part. And you're going to, if you love college basketball, I think you're going to really begin to like the NBA the way it's morphing itself right now. I would get involved and root for your own team in your own state if you have one. If not, pick a team and get behind them. So I think it's going to be a very fun year for the NBA and a good resurgence for a league that we desperately need to have as a showcase league for our country.
All right, so next up we're going to talk about the NFL, and we're going to talk, since we've got a lawyer here, we're going to talk a little bit about labor law. And the thing that stuck out to me was this. I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan. I'm not afraid to admit it. I am a little ashamed, but I'm not afraid to admit it. But they had a chance to pick up Eric Reed today, or this last weekend, or earlier in the week, and they passed on it because Mike Brown, who's the Bengals president, and he's an idiot, and not just because of this, but because if you're a Bengals fan, you know why. It would take like 10 shows to explain why he's an idiot. But instead of taking a guy who was better than either safety he had, he decided not to because he asked Eric Reed if Eric Reed was going to take a knee during the national anthem or if he would promise not to. Now, my problem with that is this. The Bengals actually have, as a team, brought down an edict that their players will not take a knee. So I'm fine with that. But my problem is this. Eric Reed has a right to express himself the way he wants. If Mike Brown puts a contract in front of him and says, this is in the contract, you can't do that, and give Eric Reed his chance to sign the contract, I think Reed would have signed the contract. I think he backed him into a corner because I think that's what they're trying to do to him and Colin Kaepernick. My take on this is this. Eric Reed has said all offseason that he would not take a knee again. But when he's asked this by Mike Brown, of course, and they put him in a corner, that's kind of a problem, I think. And I don't have a problem with anybody protesting as long as it's not against what's in their contract. So my question is, with the collusion lawsuit with Colin Kaepernick, John, does Kaepernick and any other NFL players that may want to do this, do they have a case?
I think it looks like they do now, Mike. I was wondering, but Mike Florio, who, of course, most NFL fans know from being on Sunday Night Football in the studio, went to law school with me at West Virginia University. He was a year behind me in law school, and he also started the ProFootballTalk.com website that NBC bought. Mike started that while he was still practicing law. And Mike has put on his website, going out of the collective bargaining agreement, that pointing out the language that it says that players must be on the field for the national anthem, but, quote, should, end quote, stand for it. Now, why I'm bringing that out as lawyer legal language in the collective bargaining agreement is this. When writing up any legal agreements, contracts, things like that, if you're writing up an actual statute, for somebody has to do something in common terms, you use the word shall, okay? So in the NFL CBA, that's why Mike's pointing that out. It's the word should. And why I'm explaining that is that seems to me that that's going to give Kaepernick a collusion argument, because if it was shall stand for the national anthem and they're interviewing Reed and Kaepernick about are you going to stand or not, and they're saying no, we're not, then they've got the right to say, well, you're not following the collective bargaining agreement. We can't have that, or we've got a problem with that. That's how we fairly negotiate this agreement. But this way, Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed can say, hey, it says should, it doesn't say shall, and we were dishonest with you when you interviewed us, and nobody else is signing us. And, let's face it, one thing we all know is that with the quality of backup quarterbacks in the NFL, that it's not because of talent that Colin Kaepernick wasn't on a roster this year. I mean, when they're trying to make that argument, that's ridiculous. Now, the NFL is not the state. In other words, they're not the United States government. They're not, say, the state of Illinois or Georgia. So they're a private business. Normally, without the CBA, they could do what they want. In other words, they could say, Colin Kaepernick, you're our employee. We want our employees standing for the national anthem, and you won't do it. You're fired, so to speak, or we don't want you. That would be within their rights. But when there's a union situation and you have a collective bargaining agreement, the employer and the player or the employee are bound by that collective bargaining agreement. So looking at that language, I would say that there's an argument that there is collusion, that the owners aren't following the collective bargaining agreement, and that might give them something where they wouldn't have it otherwise.
All right, Steve, what's your take?
All right. Now, can I address this from something that I don't think either one of you two really can, and that's the perspective of a player. And I don't want to diminish anybody's athletic prowess or ability, but here's what happens. When you get the privilege of playing on a high-performing team, and the first thing that a high-performing team has to do is to find a common goal. And if you're not all focused on that common goal and you don't put secondary goals below your team goal, you're not going to be a high-performing team. To me, I have an American flag on my golf bag. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in our values, our system. I believe in every part of it. But there's a point to when it starts to become disruptive when somebody puts their own individual goals above a team goal. And this, while legally, John, collusion, Kaepernick, everybody, it's there. It's not in the realm of what is best interest for the team. And there are other avenues by which to go do this and to go fight these battles. And what it does is it creates division. When was the last time we had an entire team show up at the White House? You know, we didn't get to go to the White House in 1981 because President Reagan was shot that year. That's one of the biggest disappointments in my college life, is that we missed out on that opportunity to not have the privilege of going to the White House and having a Coke with the President of the United States, irregardless of his political persuasion or anything of that nature. We didn't get to do that. And when things like this, what Kaepernick and these guys want to do, from a player's perspective, it's just disruptive to our common goal. Because I don't hold Kaepernick's beliefs. Okay? I respect them because it is the Constitution. He does have the right to do everything he says he does. But in the venue of which I'm trying to sacrifice everything I can as a player, as a coach, as an administrator, and when you start putting your own personal goals above that because you want to make a statement, I just find it to be not the right venue to do that in this environment.
All right.
That's a little selfish, I get it, but I personally think as much right as Kaepernick has to take a knee, the owner of the team has the right to say, I don't want you on my team. I believe that.
Legally,
I don't know that he has to give a reason.
How about this? I got an X real quick. I've got this for you. All right. The 1999 Rams won the Super Bowl. Correct? I think that they had a lot bigger distraction than this because they had Leonard Little on the team. Do you know who Leonard Little is?
Yeah, he was the drunk driver that went and killed people. He got to play anyway.
Leonard Little, a star defensive end for the St. Louis Rams, left a party in October of 1998 when he was a rookie. He was a driver of a car that killed a woman and mother named Susan Gutweiler. Her two children were in the car with her. They survived. Little's blood alcohol level was double the legal limit, and he ultimately received 4 years probation for killing this woman. The NFL suspended him for 8 games. He then played the second half of the 99 season. They won a Super Bowl. He went on to play for 10 years past that. So I don't really see, I mean, this is the thing. If I'm on a team, all right, if I'm coaching a team, I don't want a guy that basically murdered a woman on my team. And with good conscience, I don't think I could play with that person. Now, on the other hand, Colin Kaepernick, and I mean, we've interviewed 3 or 4 guys that were on the 49ers 2 years ago on air that said he was not a problem. Nobody thought he was a problem. Yeah, he just took a knee. And the thing is this. He said when he was asked that it had nothing to do with the military, it was all about police brutality. That would not bother me because this is the thing. As a coach, I'm against police brutality too. Now, I know like Ferguson, that's bullshit because Michael Brown didn't stick his hands up and say don't shoot. But I know there have been instances where black people, white people even, have been abused by the police. So I don't mind him standing up by that but taking a knee. My other point is this. My dad was in the military in the 1960s. My uncle, who's got 3 or 4 Purple Hearts from Vietnam, one of my best friends, Jim, he was in Vietnam for 2 years. Every one of them told me that when they went to fight for this country, they didn't fight so you would be mandated to do anything. And what you got is you got a bunch of rich white owners who were non-for-profit, tax-free up until 3 years ago, trying to tell people what they can do when what they could have done is got it in the collective bargaining agreement. Now, the problem is this. They never thought about it before because it didn't hurt their business. The only reason they're doing anything about it now is because it's hurting business. Roger Goodell last August or September when the players did this, said he didn't have a problem with it. He was all for players standing up for what they believed in. But now you're going to tell me Colin Kaepernick, who took his team to the Super Bowl as a quarterback, and is probably better than half the guys in this damn league, cannot play in the NFL because of this, but we could let somebody get a DUI and murder a woman, basically, and suspend him for 8 weeks. Josh Gordon smokes weed, and they basically ended his career for 3 years. I mean, I'm sorry, but I understand what you're saying. I do not agree with taking a knee for the national anthem. But I also know this, as an American, I cannot, put my values or what I think is right and wrong onto you and assume you to do it. So if I'm playing with a guy that is doing what he believes in and it's not hurting anybody, I don't have a problem with that, and I don't see why anybody would. I mean, he took a knee during the national anthem. Big deal. We got guys every year that beat the hell out of their wives and get to play with a 4-game suspension. We get guys that shoot up PEDs constantly, steroids, that could come out, get a 4-game suspension, and do whatever the hell they want. To me, there's a lot worse stuff going on in the NFL, and if you want to get to the NFL, what about the NFL, basically charging the United States military to advertise with them? They would have Military Day, and then they found out a couple years ago that the NFL was actually being paid by the Department of Defense for it. So don't give me this patriotism bullshit with these owners. Because if they were patriots, they wouldn't have charged the Department of Defense to have everybody have a flag waving in the crowd.
All right, my turn.
Yeah.
I don't really care what the owners think. I think the owners are profit mongers, and that's why they'll let players who do the things they do play. I think they're in it about one thing, and that's winning a championship for egotistical purposes, for self-serving purposes, for monetary purposes. I care about me. I care about me as a person who's proud of this country, who will defend this country with my life if I have to, who stands up and believes that all the people that fought and died for our flag, whether they wanted to or not, and for every police officer, one bad one out there, there's 1,000 good ones that never get recognized, that do good things. I don't care about the owners or those people. I care about me. As a teammate, I would not want one of my teammates standing next to me taking a knee at the national anthem. I would just assume he just stayed in the locker room and found another way to protest because he's disrespecting me, let alone the country. And so from my perspective, it's not about the owners. They're self-serving idiots, millionaire, billionaires, like you say. But when there's other players on there who don't hold those beliefs, and you come into my house where I'm trying to get something done, and I'm passionate about this country, about the people in this country, about doing the right thing every day, it doesn't sit well with me. And I don't want a teammate. I don't want to stand in the trench with a guy who doesn't have the same values or beliefs that I do, because I won't trust him. Because to me, what Kaepernick's doing is more self-serving than it is for the better of the team.
How's it self-serving? He
Forget
basically
the owners.
put himself out of a job.
Well, then there you be it. Then why are we arguing about it?
Because they're not allowed to get rid of him for that.
I don't care if that kid ever plays another snap in the NFL again.
That's sickening. I mean, it seriously is. I mean, he has a First Amendment right. There's a bunch of amendments here that cover this.
You're right.
And the thing is this.
It's my personal belief.
I don't think this. My personal belief is this. And I don't think anybody died on a beach of Iwo Jima would be happy with the fact that somebody would be forced to do something in this country. You fight for freedom. You fight for the freedom to have your own belief system, to think what you want, and to not care what anybody else does or thinks. I don't care what anybody else does or thinks. I thought the whole purpose of this country was you can do whatever the hell you want as long as it only affects you.
And Mike, there's nothing in this world that doesn't come with any decision you make comes with consequences.
There's no consequences here, though.
He made his decision. His consequences are what they are.
No, they're not, because it violates his contract.
That's the thing. It's actually the issue. I don't even like saying this because I would like it to be that it was a First Amendment issue, but this is why you have to explain it. To be technical, well, it's not even technical. It just is the law. The NFL is a private business. If there was no CBA, collective bargaining agreement, and even though I agree with Mike's sentiments, but the NFL is a private business. If there was no CBA, they could choose to say, we just don't like Colin Kaepernick's attitude or what he does to our business. We don't want to employ him because of what
I would have no
doing.
problem with that, John.
Right.
I would have no problem with that.
But you're right. With the CBA, the way they wrote the CBA, which is bargained equally on both sides with presumably competent lawyers and representative on both sides, they left a hole in it. And that's the way the law works. That's the American system, and that's a system of laws. And it doesn't say shall stand for the national anthem. So I think that when they're interviewing and asking what he's going to do
John, let me ask you a question. Is that right or wrong? Is that right or wrong? Because the NBA has in their collective bargaining agreement, you shall stand. You shall be respectful to the flag, to the national anthem.
It's up to that.
You shall, or you will be fined and penalized.
I personally would take the view like Mike does, even if I were ownership, that I would say, hey, look, we've got a lot of personalities out there. You could really have a lot of debate, even from a lot of civil libertarians or progressives, whatever you want to call it. I mean, call them. There is some debate. Even is Kaepernick's protest even effective? In other words, it's not even if people think he should have the right to do it. It's not really that well defined. What we're trying to achieve by the protest isn't that well defined. And I think he's obviously shown a lot of courage because he's losing his career. I don't think that to me can be debated. And I agree with Mike also. I think that it's always been a straw man argument that his protest is somehow a disrespect to the military. I mean, as Mike pointed out, the military's fighting for the rights of freedom of speech, but this really isn't that issue. It's more of a labor issue, an employment issue, where it's maybe not as sexy that way, but that's really what it comes down to under the law. It's not a First Amendment issue because it's not the state. So in the CBA,
he's protected.
Yeah, it doesn't say he shall.
I agree with you entirely. Under the laws of our Constitution, he's protected. I'm just telling you.
It's just the laws it's what the NFL agreed to, Steve.
Right. It's what the NFL agreed to.
Right. You're all exactly right. I'm just telling you, as a teammate, he's not a guy that I'd want on my team.
But as Mike pointed out, there's a lot of.
My opinion too.
There's a lot of.
There would be at least one guy on every team you would play on in the NFL that you would have less respect for than Colin Kaepernick.
Most likely. You're right. Yeah.
So, I mean,
there's domestic abusers, there's people with criminal charges.
I'm aware of that. I know. I'm just saying there's different ways of protesting and doing it. You don't yell fire in a crowded movie theater.
But this is not putting anybody in danger.
Things you do and don't do.
But I think what Mike pointed out to me in the sports issue
I'm
really is no.
I'm
but
I think it's something really. In this.
Nobody's a villain in this. It's an opinion.
Right. I think Mike pointed out something important, though, to me that's big. The NFL when the NFL tried to get involved in, and I'm not saying they shouldn't because there's so many quote unquote bad characters, but when the NFL started attempting to legislate what conduct was going to be acceptable within their league by players, off the field, and what was going to be acceptable and what wasn't, they're so inconsistent. It's so all over the place. It just so doesn't make sense anymore that, when you see that Kaepernick doesn't have a job with everything else they've got going on, that's the part where it just doesn't seem to make sense. That part's not legal. But it's just the league and Goodell, the money he makes is always comical to me because he's so ineffective. He gets paid an astronomical amount of money to be completely ineffective. And
I need a job like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a mess. And I think we'll get to that another topic we're going to discuss tonight is where are the various.
John, let me ask you a question. Why don't they just put this to bed and just leave the players in the locker room during the playing of the national anthem? Why don't they just do that?
You know what would work even more?
That has been discussed, and that has been discussed.
Why don't they
this
just
is
do
the
that?
thing.
Yeah.
That is what they do. That's what they do in college football.
Yeah, just leave them in the locker room.
Yeah, and I wrote an article about that last week. But this is the other thing. If you just didn't put the TV cameras on them, because let's face it, I don't remember until they started taking knees. Like if you're watching the 1 o'clock game, Steve, on the NFL, or 4 o'clock if you're in LA, I don't remember ever even showing the national anthem until this started happening. So this is something the media has tried to turn into something so they can build their ratings too.
Yeah, and I just want to go on record saying I'm all about the Constitution. I'm all about your right to do and protest in a peaceful manner or whatever way you want to. I get that, and I love that about our Constitution and this country, and that's what sets us apart from the rest of the world. I just think there's a time and a place for everything, and I don't think that this is the time and the place to make that statement. I don't know what its purpose is other than it gets recognized, but yet there's been no real manifesto come out of Kaepernick's mouth other than he takes a knee. There's been no manifesto as to what his message is. What is he really? He just takes the knee, we put him on a camera, and then we let all the Twitter followers and idiots make it write his manifesto. What is Colin Kaepernick's manifesto? What is his sole purpose of doing this?
I think there's a debate as if the message is effective.
It's disruptive to the franchises, to the owners. They're forced to deal with it. To Goodell's forced to deal with it. The players are forced to deal with it. And I know that's how change is effective. Without Martin Luther King, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are with civil rights. He forced this. I just don't think the flag, and not the military. I don't think it's about the military. I don't think the flag is the thing to attack. I think there are other ways of attacking this issue of police brutality or anything like that. I just don't think the American flag is the way to do it.
Yeah, and Steve, I agree.
My personal belief.
See, Steve, I agree with you, but I also don't think my personal beliefs should govern other people.
No, they shouldn't.
So
but I have a right to voice my personal
real
belief.
Quick, my dog went to potty and he's barking outside now, so I got to let him in. So we're going to take a quick break, check a word from my bookie. We'll be back in 1 minute and 9 seconds.
Hey, Puckheads, this is Patrick.
And Jason.
From the Puck Guys podcast at the Grueling Truth Network, and we're here with one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money.
The Grueling Truth has partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on.
Yeah,
that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag.
In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie.ag will give you a 50% bonus on your first deposit of up to $3,000 in extra cash. Just enter the promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. Where do they got to go, Jay?
That is a smart-looking question, Pat. They need to go to visit mybookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Network, and enjoy your winning today.
Mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
Bella broke up.
All right, guys, we are back on Survive in Advance. I'm Mike Goodpaster with Steve Risley, my co-host, and John Einreinhofer, who is just a visitor tonight.
Wishes he wasn't visiting.
Why? I think this is going really well. I thought that was a good discussion.
Yeah.
So next up,
I respect his right to do it. I'm glad he has that right to do it.
All right.
I just don't like the way he's going about doing it.
Enough
said.
Next
Move on.
Up.
Can I get a breaking news story here real quick? Can I get
one? We
got in the world of sports?
We got.
John Cena and Nikki Bella have broken up. Their marriage is not going to happen.
Okay, who's John Cena?
John Cena is World Wrestling Federation.
Oh, John Cena.
The stud of wrestling.
Yeah, that's not
Nikki
sports.
Bella's a world women's champion.
No
Flash off of TMZ and Twitter. They have split up. Too bad.
All right. So we gave you our poll question, and that's at The Grueling Truth. And from now on, the morning of every show, which is every Sunday and Thursday night at 9 o'clock, you can go to the Twitter at The Grueling Truth. We'll have a poll of something we're going to talk about. And this poll is actually getting a ton of votes. You can go to at Grueling Truth. And the question is, what will be the most popular sports league in the United States in the year 2043? So basically, 25 years from now, you got the NFL, NBA, MLS, MLB. You can throw in the NHL. I don't know why. But I do like hockey. I just don't think hockey's such a niche sport. It's the same reason I wouldn't include boxing. It has its own little niche. It's always going to be unpopular in that little niche. But
I think hockey does that intentionally. I think hockey keeps it niche. They sell out every game. You can't get a ticket to a hockey game.
Yeah, but see, I think the problem with that and why it's a regional niche sport is because hockey doesn't translate as well on TV as it does in person.
No, it's a very hard game to follow if you don't know the rules.
Yeah.
So they're some of the best athletes in the world.
My problem is I'm almost 50 years old, Steve, and I know you're at least 15, 20 years older than me, and your eyesight starts to go, and it's hard to follow the puck.
Yeah,
hockey's not as good on TV as it is at the arena. No doubt about that.
Right, I agree. Yeah. That's why it sells out every arena, and that's why I think they're happy with their place in sports lore and history, and I think they have a great business model. And I think they run as taut a ship in terms of fan participation, fan loyalty as any sport there is in the professional ranks these days. And I don't think they really want to screw with it. I think they're all profitable. They're making good money. Their players are happy. You don't hear them in the news, in a negative way very often. The lore of the Stanley Cup going around everywhere is now as big a tradition and legend as anything. What did you do at the Stanley Cup? Right. They've got they don't need to break it.
So we got a lot of feedback here. And I think when you look at these sports, the NFL, as we just talked about, I mean, is so, I don't know. It's just like you don't know when it catches a catch. The ratings have taken a dive, and let's face it, with Colin Kaepernick and everything that happened there, we're not going to rehash that. But the thing is, half the people were for it, half the people were against it. So no matter what happens, half the people are going to be pissed. That doesn't help it. And when you look at it, the game's a little bit softer than what it used to be. The NHL, I think, like I said, is a niche, even though I know Jason Lamb is blowing up Twitter and Facebook right now, trying to tell me that it's the biggest one. We got Michael Pallas from New York who says soccer. I do have a good one here from Corey Chappelle, who says flag football. So, yeah, we've got like 40, 50 responses here. To me, I don't think there's any doubt what I think will be the biggest, and that's the NBA, and that's just from what I see today. And the fact that the NBA, it's not as rough as it used to be, but when you watch an NBA game from 1985, it's quicker today. But it looks a lot like what you see today. Where the NFL, I watch a game from 1985, and it's a lot different, John.
Yeah, I actually like this issue, and I like to think about sports and society and different angles about it. And I've been thinking about this a couple of years since the CT issue popped up in the NFL. I actually come from a football background, but I think that if you look at it honestly and intellectually, I think the NFL has already started their steady decline that is not going to be reversed. And it's going to be a question of in 25 years, then how far has it slipped? I think it's going to slip far. I was mentioning earlier in the show, that I was in New Jersey earlier this week. Legislation is now being proposed in New Jersey that you're not going to be allowed to play tackle football age 12 or under. I think that type of legislation will be passing there or somewhere else soon. It's going to start there, and it's going to work its way up. I think what you're going to see at some point, what I project with football, is going to be at some point along the line, the Ivy League's going to have to stop playing football because they're not going to be able to reconcile it with being part of a high-level academic institution. And then where does that leave? Then you get into the big boys, but the University of Michigan likes to pride themselves as, and they are, one of the top public universities in the country. So when the Ivy Leagues start banning it, then where does that leave places like Michigan or Cal Berkeley? Pressure is going to be on them, despite how much more money they make and how the alumni are going to be outraged. And then eventually that ties into the NFL because, if you're going to have it dropping off in college, you're going to have participation dropping off, as you pointed out, Mike. Then you have quality of play issues because they've tried to
and
we're
already seeing the quality of play issues with the lack of practice time now.
Right. No more tackling in practice, and then you're trying to legislate out a lot of the contact, and that's going to continue. It's not going to stop. One thing that you could debate this morally, but the NFL, it's already too late now. But what they could have done is, and of course we follow boxing regularly, Mike, but and cover it. But there's a lot of people morally opposed to boxing. But one thing about boxing is nobody's claiming boxing's safe. Nobody ever tried to claim boxing was safe. The NFL got caught up when first they tried to bury the CT issue, which has been well chronicled. They tried to fight it. Then when they which they shouldn't have done, but once they gave up on that, then they decided to go through these motions about, well, we're going to make the game safer. You can't make it safer. In other words, what they could have done a few years ago when they realized they made the mistake trying to deny the CT issue is said, well, you know what, we are dangerous. We're going to admit it. You might want to think about that if you're going to have your kid play or watch it on TV. And some fans would have dropped off, but then they could have left the game more as it was, and you could have debated that morally, but they could have, made the dangers well known and said, if you're going to be at risk if you play this. But they've chosen to take this route about heads up football and claim they can make the game safer. They can't. I'll tell you right now, if you really want to get into the medicine of it, concussion protocol doesn't really make it particularly safer because it's repetitive head injuries that are causing the CTE. So it's everybody collisions, getting your head jarred around all the time, whether you had a concussion that got diagnosed or not. So, concussion protocol may be safer, but that's not going to prevent this CTE from occurring. So why I went into that basically speech on the whole issue is that I think it's a foregone conclusion that the NFL is not going to be anywhere near as popular now, as popular in 25 years as it is now, even though it started to decline and the participation is declining. Now, then you project how far is it going to decline as to what openings it's going to leave for other sports. So that's why I mentioned that college football scenario, because one thing Americans are used to is a big festival once a week in the fall. And even though I'm not a soccer fan.
Don't say that. Hey,
I find
soccer morally corrupt. I find soccer morally corrupt.
Why I'm saying that, though, is even though soccer's not that popular, the TV ratings are low now, could soccer be that once-a-week festival in a stadium like it is in Europe?
We've been hearing that since the 1960s, though, John, and it's never gained popularity.
Right, but you did not have the vacuum that's going to be created by the complete decline of tackle football that you're going to have starting now. Now, I'm not saying that I think in terms of quality of product, I agree the NBA would have the best shot at filling the vacuum, but the NBA plays so many games, you're not going to have that once a week type festival rhythm that everybody's used to in the fall, which, let's face it, college football, it's just, and even the NFL to a degree with the tailgating, everything, and the gambling, it's just, and people are used to these once a week rhythms. If something has replaced it in that rhythm, people may just go along with their lives and doing their tailgating to a different sport, and things might go on similar to what they were with the NFL and college football. But NBA doesn't really suit itself to that. So that's where I'm wondering if maybe, even though it's not anywhere particularly popular as a viewer sport in the United States, if soccer's got an opening there. But I think NBA, with the athletic play, the running, the jumping, the spectacular dunks, that in terms of quality of play, in terms of quality of product, they've probably got the best shot.
All right, so Steve, what's your take on the NFL, where it's headed, and what will be the most popular in 25 years?
I'm going to take I mean, I've listened to you guys talk, and I think this is what I think. I think that looking at the overall picture of the landscape of the world as it evolves, I don't think that there's going to be much movement in any of the physical professional sports. I think there'll always be a niche for football. There'll always be a niche for basketball. There'll always be a niche for baseball, auto racing. You'll always have a fan base that will probably not deviate to any great degree, and one will be more. I personally think, and the NBA has already started this year, I think that the most popular sport in 25 years will be video gaming. I think that you will see more athletes, or as what we will perceive athletes in 25 years, become masters of technical skills, of learning these games. And the NBA started this league this year called the NBA Y2K. They actually had a draft. They actually had a draft of gamers. And there's 18 teams in the NBA right now that are actually sponsoring players, paying players to video game the NBA experience on gaming stations. And I look at technology as it advances, as the internet continues to expand, and the way things are going. I think there'll always be us jocks who want to go out and sweat and bang and body, and who, no matter what the concussion protocols are, will want to play baseball, play football, play basketball. And those leagues will continue to exist to a little bit of plus, a little bit of minus based on what events happen. But I personally think in 25 years, you're going to see professional gaming leagues take over. And they're
already giving scholarships for it, aren't they?
They're giving scholarships for this. Colleges are setting up degrees on this. The games are getting so much more sophisticated, and skill level the players are. And like I said, the NBA is paying people now to represent. Mark Cuban had the number one pick of the Dallas Mavericks, paying some guy like $30,000 or $40,000 a year, moved him to Dallas. He is gaining an NBA Y2K or whatever it is on behalf of the Dallas Mavericks in a league created by the NBA. I think that's where it's going to go because it's all-encompassing. You can be a couch potato and participate. You can be Pele or Ronaldo or whoever the greatest athlete in the world is these days and participate. And I think in 25 years, you're going to see something like that come up, and we're not even looking at it right now.
Yeah.
I don't think you're ever going to totally get rid of football, basketball, baseball, auto racing, any physical sport. They're always going to be there. There's always going to be people that want to go.
Actually, we had one person that commented, Chris Robinette, who said esports. So,
yeah, I think esports is where it's going to go.
Yeah, and I can tell you this. I was just talking about the sports leagues here, but yeah, you go there. That would not surprise me, and I think that's a really sad thing. I just do. There ain't nothing like getting out and hitting somebody. But
no, you're right. As we know it, But no, that's our generation. That's our mentality. The younger generation, the millennials, they don't feel that way. They don't feel the physicality that we do. They're happy being, unattractive couch potatoes and being smarter than the rest of the world.
Well, one thing though that I'll say, and one thing I'll say though in their defense, that even though we grew up doing this, I can't really fault them for this. And this is another factor in live attendance and TV ratings. The millennial generation, and I think this is almost to their credit, really. They don't want to sit there in front of a TV and watch sports for 2.5 hours. Right. They're not. To them, that they can just watch the highlights. They don't want to sit there and there's too many other options for them. And they don't want to sit 3.5 hours, watch a game in person or watch it on TV. So there's going to have to be adjustments with the leagues. These TV ratings and packages are not going to be what they're used to. And whatever league is the healthiest and survives, they're going to have to adjust to that.
I came home from golf today and watched the Long Beach Grand Prix in all of about 30 minutes. Rather than pay $250 for a ticket, go stand around in the stands in the heat down in Long Beach, California. I've watched the whole race. I saw Alexander Rossi win it. Sorry for the spoiler for those of you that haven't watched it yet. They're still listening to us, but I don't think that we want to invest the time with the media that's out there to us in terms of streaming and DVRing and things, and it's only going to get better. But I see people wanting to participate competitively, but the competition as we know it is going to move from physicality to intellectually. And the NBA is piloting this right now with this Y2K league. NFL is going to grab it. Baseball is going to grab it. Auto racing is going to grab it. And I think in 25 years, you're going to see gaming as the largest participatory and visual sport in the world. Because you can do it. There's no sport you can't do. You want to play Y2K golf? Play golf. You want to play soccer? Play soccer. You want to play cricket? Play cricket. You can have leagues and do it from the comfort of your own home. The level of participation is so much greater. Anybody can participate. You don't have to be 7 foot tall and be able to shoot from 45 feet out or be 320 pounds and take steroids. Like I said, you can eat Big Macs.
You can be 320 pounds and not take the steroids.
Yeah, exactly. I think gaming is where it's all going to end up in terms of the largest paying professional sport. At some point, these guys will become genuine superstars, where they are our true heroes now in this young generation who grows up. I mean, I can barely play Atari, Pong. All right, my son gets on me with Xbox, and all I know is smack the thing against the wall, and things start happening. I don't know what button I'm hitting, but he can master this thing, level 9,700 of war games or whatever it is, and I don't even know there is a level 9,700.
Yeah, and I don't know how to push all them buttons at the same time and make
I don't either. I have no idea, but the young people do. And,
hey, they'd look like fun, though, Steve, if we could figure it out.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. He sits back there, and we don't see him for days.
Oh, that's how my kids are, too. That's the one great thing about that.
As soon as they figure out they can get paid for doing this, wait, I can get paid for doing this? Now I'm going to get really good at it. I think gaming is where it's going to be in 25 years. That will be the number one professional sport, in my opinion.
That would not surprise me. I think that is a very good call.
Yeah, I think that's where it's going.
I think that, Mary took you down Thursday on that argument, but you redeemed yourself tonight.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right.
I don't want to say Mary made good arguments. Mary made good arguments, and I don't want to rehash Mary's discussion.
I was just teasing you. You don't have to bring it up. But
Mary's heart is in the right place. We want to keep things as pure as we can. Unfortunately, that's not real world.
Yeah.
It's not going to be pure anymore.
No, it's just going to be
as much as we want it to be.
Video games.
It's not going to be. But I think video gaming in 25 years is the highest paid professional sport.
Man, and I'll tell you, I don't know about you, John, but I remember having an Atari in like 1979. And the basketball game was like 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, and they were like little block figures. I never thought it would turn out to this. So the question is this: 25 years from now, there may be an entirely new sport that everybody loves.
Yeah, I think the way this might play out, it's possible. One thing in terms of, I think certain sports would be better off for their futures going back to their niche or their tradition. I think the NHL, they're going to have a CTE issue, and, they're really a Northeastern sport. If there's transplants from the Northeast or the upper Midwest, in the South, if there's enough of them, they might support it. But, the NHL going back about 30 years thought that they were going to become more national in the U.S. And where they made some inroads, it didn't play out like they thought. I think they're better off in their niche. I think the same thing happened to NASCAR, when they moved out of the Southeast. It was just kind of in their DNA. And everybody thought, including myself, not everybody maybe, but a lot of people thought, including NASCAR, that they were going to really blow up big and become more of a national sport. And they're in decline. That hasn't happened. So I think that they also would be better off in their niche. And then I think baseball, where they make a mistake, is – baseball is kind of like soccer. Of course, you call it football in Europe, soccer. More of the quality of play of that sport. It's the tradition that keeps it going. And, when baseball gets away from its tradition, I mean, to me, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. Anything they do to tinker, they're not going to be gaining new fans, and they're just going to be alienating older fans. So I think baseball should stay in their lane with tradition. Every time they get away from it, they add playoffs, they make changes. They're playing with fire, because when they lose tradition, there's not going to be anybody following. There's not going to be anybody following baseball just based on the quality of play, no matter what they want to say.
In defense of the CTE issue and things like that, think about this. I grew up in an era of, and all of us did, of football being a contact sport, and the aches, bumps, bruises, pains. We didn't think CTE back then, but now they do. But yet, me as a parent, I would love for my son to play football, because I think it's a great sport. I think it generally was a fair sport. Basketball is a fair sport, but basketball is a contact sport. But the CTE issues, again, you have to look beyond just the ability to play the sport. You have to look at life after sport, because sport really ends for most of us, in our 30s, realistically. Yet with the gaming concept of it, you can play football until you're 75 years old.
Yeah, Tom Brady
can play forever.
Win 60 Super Bowls.
16 more Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Tom Brady can win 16 more Super Bowls gaming his way, and need every bit of ounce of brain power that he has to guide his team on a long drive at the end of the game. He still needs a strategy, yet the risk of injury and long-term effects diminishes entirely. And I'm even more convinced now than when I open my mouth about this. I think it's gaming is where you'll see the money being spent, and the gamers will be the LeBron Jameses, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, the Babe Ruths of the world. In 25 years will be those guys.
All right,
you
guys.
Can do Olympics. You can do Olympics.
Yeah. Well, the Olympics
Our
sucks
Olympics
anymore with no more communists, so you need communists to make the Olympics good. I want to thank everybody that voted in our poll. NBA actually won 39%. Esports is something.
And that's a fair pick. That's a fair pick.
Yeah, but I didn't include the esports. Didn't even think about it. Chris Robinette did. He posted it on there. So I'm going to call you and
Chris.
The winners.
You and I think alike, buddy.
Yeah, so we had right around 80 votes in about 25 minutes. We had the NFL at 35%, the NBA 39%, MLS 13%, Major League Baseball at 13%. I want to remind everybody.
In terms of physical sports, the NBA has the most upside potential right now. They have the most upside potential in terms of physical sports right now to grow.
All right, guys, I want to remind you, you can hear us every Sunday night at 9 Eastern, every Thursday night at 9 Eastern also. So make sure you come back here to grillingtruth.net or hit us up on Spreaker Thursday night live at 9. A few show notes. Tomorrow night, we've got Inside Boxing Weekly with myself, John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Pricer. Our special guest will be Thomas Triber, who is one of the 3 biggest ring announcers in the world. He'll be on the show with us. Thursday, I'll have a special show at 1 o'clock in the afternoon live. I'll be talking with lightweight champion of the world, Robert Easter. So make sure you check us out there also. Also, we get the Cincinnati Bengals weekly show with Joe Kelly. We did that today. That'll be up on the website within the next 24 hours. You can go to iTunes, download the Grueling Truth app. You can hear all of our shows on iHeart, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.